Tonight's episode of Fireside is brought to you by Legends of Belize. Visit legendsofbelize.com to learn more.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Fireside Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jordan Cline, and as always, I got a great show planned out. My guest tonight is Dave and Ryan from Paranormal Quest. Before we get to them, just a few announcements. Newsly is an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in the history of the internet, the entire web becomes listenable. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. Stop scrolling, start listening. You can follow any topic as specific as you'd like, from sports, science, to Bitcoin, or even the Kardashians. It'll find you the latest articles and read them to you aloud. They also have podcasts, so explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. My show, Fireside Paranormal Podcast, is there too. Download and use Newsly for free now from www.newsly.me or from the link in the description, and use promo code FIRESIDE where the eyes are ones. I'll also put that in the description, and you receive 1 month free premium subscriptions. Also, be sure to check out American Paranormal Magazine at paranormalzine.com. They have a lot of really neat things coming up in the works, and you don't want to miss out on that, so go to paranormalzine.com and check it out. You know, I do love to support my friends that are podcasters as well, so here is a promo from Kristen with the Paranormal Girl Pod.
Have you encountered something you can't explain? Do you believe in the paranormal but haven't experienced it? Are you a skeptical believer too? My name is Kristen, and I host the Paranormal Girl podcast. My show is an education in the paranormal. Join me as we explore a different topic each season and dissect origins, theories, experts, and so much more. Whether it's life after death, cryptids, ghosts, or any other paranormal topic, we will pull it apart and put it back together again to fully understand it. If you're a fascinated skeptic, a believer yearning to know more, if you're looking for an education in the paranormal, I'm your Paranormal Girl.
Be sure to check that show out. She is good people. So make sure you subscribe, like, rate it, all that kind of good stuff. That really does help podcasters out. All right, tonight's first featured story is going to come in from Sabrina.
My name is Sabrina, and I'm from Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania.
Welcome.
So my spooky story is I was actually in New Jersey, and there's this really old cemetery in, I want to say it's like near Trenton. So it goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War. Like soldiers who fought in the war are buried there. Yeah. And me and my cousin were trying to like talk to the ghosts like you do when I think I was 15. And we found this one grave, and it was really old, and we thought his name was really cool. And I was like, oh, he was probably such a cute boy. And so we walked over the grave itself, and I heard footsteps behind me. And I thought it was my cousin, and I looked around like, hey, there's no one there. And it was just like the footsteps, right? And I got freaked out, and I ran out of the cemetery. And then, like, I was there for the summer, so we went back like a week or two later. And I was like, come walk with me. It's really spooky. You're going to hear the footsteps. And it happened like every time we walked over it. Yeah. Like really, like the scientific method, you have to repeat and get the same conclusion each time. We got the same conclusion each time. Yeah. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next up, we have Cherron.
My name is Cherron Walker. I'm originally from Washington State.
Nice.
And I've been living here in Wheeling, West Virginia for about 7 years now with my partner. Well. I have a couple stories, but it's the most memorable was when I used to work for this gravel outfit. We were laying down gravel for logging trucks up in the mountains on my reservation, the Yakima Reservation. And we had a crushing site there, And my first year with this outfit, I was working underneath a rock crusher. It was the dirtiest job I ever had. It built character. It humbled me. And the second year was when we got this job up in the mountains. And they moved up the rock crusher up there, so I assumed I would be shoveling underneath the rock crusher. And my boss goes, "No, come here." And he has me put my shovel down and walks me over to their roller. So I got promoted from working underneath the rock crusher to being a roller operator, and I got a $2 raise. It took me about a week to get used to this, and I started out near the rock crusher, and I began rolling out towards the roadways furthest away, further out into the seated area that's forested near Mount Adams. I didn't realize how far away I was until this incident happened. So on one of the last occasions, just before this job ended, I was about 5 to 6 miles away from any people and the rock crusher as well. Trucks were coming up and dumping gravel down, and the backhoe would come in and level it out, and then it'd be my turn to pack it down with the roller. And the wind picked up, and I mean, I grew up with wildlife. I've smelled bear. I've seen a lot of wildlife growing up where I'm from, and this smell that I picked up was not anything I'd ever come across before.
Really?
Yeah. It was the strangest, smelliest smell I'd ever had the pleasure of smelling. I pulled over the roller to the side of the road, turned it off because the wind picked up and it was getting really dusty. And then all of a sudden I heard I was in this area where the cliffs and the trees were butted up against the roadway. So anything that you hear, if a rock were to drop, you'd hear it. It would echo. Well, I heard something scurrying up the cliffside, not very far from me, and I could see through just a hole in the tree line up the cliffside this patch of fur, and it was like brown and orange.
Oh, really?
And it sounded like something was grunting, trying to scurry up there. And I'm like, if this hurt, if I can smell it and I can hear it, chances are it heard me long ago.
Yeah.
Long ago, before I even, with all the machinery and stuff going on, yeah. It got to the top of the cliffside, and I'm like in absolute amazement of this. And I caught sight of it, and this thing was tall. It was like 8 or 9 feet tall, I would say. It didn't take very long for it to get up the cliffside either. I mean, it was like I swear to God, it lifted like 3 times. It was at the top. And what looked at me, I thought I was like, great, I'm going to run across the bear, and this is the last time anyone's ever going to know I, was alive. And then I thought about Bigfoot, because people talk about Bigfoot on my reservation. Yeah. That's Bigfoot area. This thing had the head of like a canine.
Really?
Yeah. It had a snout like a dog, almost dog-like. And I've heard of stories about dogmen, but his hair was weird. It was this orange, deep brown kind of color. And it snorted and grunted and then ran away. Like it literally snorted at me, grunted, and said, as if to say, "You're lucky I'm letting you go."
Come at me, bro.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I tried to tell him at the time, my stepdad, he's no longer my stepdad now, and he's like, "You just saw a bear." And everybody that I worked with in the outfit, they're like, you saw a bear. It wasn't, they didn't believe me. The only person that did believe me was my mom. My mom was the only one, because on our reservation we have, I guess over in like Michigan, they have the dogman. Well, we have Spelii. That's Sahaptin language, Yakama Nation language for trickster.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they're called. And they like to play tricks, and they like to mess with people. I've never heard any actual accounts of them attacking people, but they're very territorial. They're kind of freaky looking too.
Wow.
I mean, I'd only heard a couple other stories in my lifetime, but that was the incident that I had while working up on my reservation. And it was just, I realized it's probably hard to believe. I found it hard to believe myself that I experienced that, but still, it was just the trippiest thing in my life.
That is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherron. Very cool story. Up next, Heather.
Hi, I am Heather. I am originally from Miami, Florida, and I have had quite a few things happen. So at my mom's house, where our computer room was at the time, because I am an old,
Yeah, we had a computer room too. I feel you.
So it was past the kitchen, which was past where all of the bedrooms are. So I used to sit up late at night, chatting on the AOL and playing like solitaire and all kinds of other nonsense. And I had a stepdad that would occasionally work nights. So in order to get to the computer room, you had to walk out of all of the rooms into the kitchen, into the computer room. I would constantly see somebody walking into the kitchen, always assume that it was my stepdad because he worked nights, take off my headphones, go to say hello. There was never anybody there. There was never anybody there. No, not one time. Like I would literally get up and walk around the house and everybody else was dead asleep.
Wow.
There were times we had like a separate washroom, like for the washer, dryer, ironing board, all that was outside of the house. And at the time, my parents thought that it would be fun to send me to a private Catholic school for 6th grade. That did not last. And I was in there ironing my uniform one day, and the door in between the two rooms slammed by itself.
Oh, wow.
And I heard someone whispering my name about 3 or 4 times. And I thought that it was my stepdad playing a prank on me. So I decided to like throw the door open. There was nobody there. It was just me by myself. And then at my grandmother's house.
Now, is this farther away?
Yes.
Okay.
It's about 15, 20 minutes away. The room that I stayed in there had an attached bathroom. And I would wake up multiple times a week to the shower turning on like full force. And the first couple of times it was very scary because I was like, why is this turning on? And then after that, it just got really annoying because whoever or whatever was turning the shower on never had the common decency to turn it back off. So I had to get up out of my very comfy, cozy bed to turn the shower off, even though I repeatedly asked for them to turn the shower off.
Ghost is so inconsiderate.
They're very, very inconsiderate. Like, I'm sorry that I'm sharing your space. I'm not even in the shower. I'm not even in the room with you. You just turn it off, and they never did. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
very much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Heather. If you want your story to be one of our featured stories, make sure you send me an email, firesideparanormalpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you on there.
Legends of Belize is a series about mythical creatures that dwell in the jungles and waters of Belize. The Belizean legends are captured, documented, and preserved like never before in a comprehensive art series and books with fully colored and detailed images of fine art by artists, authors, and award-winning animators Dismas and Grissi G. Discover the supernatural creatures that await deep in the jungles, such as the mysterious dwarf called Tata Duende with backwards feet known to rip the thumbs off of trespassers, or the beautiful shape-shifting woman known to locals as the Ishtabai, who seduces drunks to never be seen again. These creatures and many more can be found in the Legends of Belize books. Learn about the cryptozoological, paranormal, and unexplained creatures that haunt Belize. Be fascinated. Be terrified. Belize. Legend of Belize books are available in print and ebook. Buy your copy from your favorite online bookstore such as Amazon, KDP, Apple Books, and many more. Also be sure to visit legendsofbelize.com.
If you are a business, author, investigation group, or just a really cool individual and you have questions about show sponsorship, send me an email, firesideparanormalpodcast@gmail.com, and we can discuss it. All right, I want to get to my guest. Join me by the fire as we welcome Dave and Ryan with Paranormal Quest. Guys, you with us?
We are here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jordan,
Welcome,
for having us
welcome.
on.
Thank you guys so much. I know you stay busy. So thank you for taking a little bit of time out. I mean, I think every day there's like a new episode of Paranormal Quest on YouTube.
Yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it? It feels that it's like every day we got something new coming out. But really, it's just a new video every week over on our YouTube channel, Paranormal Quest. But it does. We stay pretty busy traveling, filming, and it's a lot of fun. We wanted to do this for a long, long time. We started out our YouTube channel in 2010.
Oh, nice.
And it was Dave, Steve Hummel, and I, and we uploaded maybe like 3 or 4 videos a year back then. You know, we'd investigate when we had time, and it's evolved over time, and now at this point, it's been over a year that this has been Dave and I's only full-time job, right, Dave?
Yes, we've been fortunate enough to be able to do this full time, and it has been a whirlwind. It has been crazy. We've done and seen some crazy things, but it's been awesome.
So how long did it take? Because you said the first year you were maybe 3 episodes a year. When did it really pick up for y'all?
I would say we were really just using it as something fun to do as a hobby to investigate and upload a video every now and again up until about 2019, I want to say. I think there may have been at most maybe like 20 to 30 videos on the channel by 2019. And then we just decided that we were going to start doing it once every 2 weeks. We would upload a video. And then starting in 2020, right at the time that the pandemic hit, is when we decided we were going to go full bore. And that's when we started with a new video every week. And we've had a new video every week since 2020, with a couple of exceptions. And it's taken us to Massachusetts, down or over to Kansas and Iowa, and hopefully even further, because here at the end of the year, we have the furthest trip we've ever had. So,
where y'all going?
we are going to be going to Adelaide, South Australia.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So we're going to
Excited
be going
for that one.
quite a few haunted locations over there. So we are getting the hookup from the Adelaide's Haunted Horizons Ghost Tours, and they're going to show us all the amazing places in Australia. So we're excited.
Oh man, that's going to be a trip right there. All right, so I gotta ask, with COVID, the way it kind of shut everything down, you guys stepped it up to the next level. Did you have any obstacles, like getting into these places? Did you have any like a hard time, like, all right, we're gonna leave the house, but like mask up and put your gloves on and get your spray,
some Lysol?
That's it, Lysol. Like, in my head, I'm like, it's latex spray, and I'm like, I'm not gonna say that.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I think if we should have started to try it sooner than what we did, because trying to grow the YouTube channel, finding a new place to investigate and film every single week in the worst part of a global pandemic was just a nightmare. I remember when we did the Conjuring House and the USS Salem back in 2020, or 2021, excuse me. That was the January, or it was February of 2021. We did the Conjuring House and the USS Salem, and we could have had so many more locations on that trip if it wouldn't have been for the pandemic, because we had wanted to go to the Witch House in Salem. We had wanted to go to the House of the Seven Gables in Salem, but everything in Salem, Massachusetts was shut down, and you couldn't investigate anywhere. So it was a huge obstacle to try and overcome, just to find locations that would let you in. And then once you were in, there were mask mandates and stipulations that we had to follow. And of course, everyone had their own opinions on the masks. So not only did we have to deal with wearing the masks for the entire investigation, but then we had to listen to people complain about the fact that we were wearing masks in the comment section.
You can't make anybody happy. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, not to mention, just traveling in general became way more difficult because every place closed early, and you had these like state by state regulations of what time you had to be off the streets or whatever it was, and it made it very, very difficult, more difficult than it already is.
Oh, hands down.
And I remember when the pandemic first hit, we did these solo investigations, if you could call them that, because we were taking the restrictions very seriously. And Dave and I have been roommates ever since we started working as business partners on the channel, going seriously with that. And so we had contact with one another, but we didn't really have contact with Steve or Jason, and we didn't know if we were allowed to be near them. So we just would drop off the equipment in the trunk of their car and say, hey, you want to take this equipment? I remember Steve went to the Bel Air house by himself, and Jason went down to the West Virginia penitentiary by himself. And we took it very seriously back then. And then after a couple months of that, we thought, you know what, let's just all come back together, and we'll self-isolate, we'll self-quarantine. It's just the four of us.
Yeah. In my head, this is the craziest thing, because I did investigations for a while. I don't know if I'd want to go into like the Bel Air house or the pen and just do a solo by myself investigate. Like, I'd want somebody there that I could run to when I get scared.
And it's fun too because it's like testing your own limits. We used it as an opportunity to push our own boundaries to see if we could, how long we could stay in some of these haunted locations. But most of those locations that we went to, we were very familiar with already. It wasn't really that big of a challenge to stay alone in the West Virginia penitentiary for Jason because he'd done it dozens, if not hundreds of times at that point, because we all had worked there. We all had our own amount of times just walking around alone in that prison. And the Bel Air house, we had been around that house, because it's 5 minutes down the road from where I grew up, so we've had quite a few rodeos with the Bel Air house. So if it had been an unfamiliar location, it might have been a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let's get into the origins of you, because I know you said, hey, we all used to work at the penitentiary. How did it start? How did Paranormal Quest start?
I'll let Dave take this one because Dave was the first out of all of us to actually start working there and hanging out there.
Yes. So, it started way back in 1999, believe it or not. My mom and I, she had started a paranormal investigation group. And somehow, one way or another, I can't remember exactly how, but she figured out about doing the overnight investigations up at the West Virginia Penitentiary. And, we drove up there and we did those for years and years. And eventually I met Ryan here on one of the overnight investigations. And before that, he had actually met Jason. So they were kind of friends, but I didn't know Jason. And me and Ryan were friends, but Jason didn't know who I was. And then we all kind of met Steve, and it kind of just cascaded from there.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that, any?
We were all convicts that met in prison, and it's interesting on how that all works out because I don't know that we would have met if Dave's mom had not captured the famous Shadow Man photograph. Polly Gear.
Oh, that's your mom?
Yes.
That's my mom, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Captured the famous Shadow Man photograph at the West Virginia Penitentiary, and through that photograph capture, she kind of had an agreement with the penitentiary at that point because she had done the investigations there so many times and she had captured probably the most prolific piece of evidence in the history of the penitentiary. They allowed her to come along as like a guest tour guide. They would pay her once a month. She would come up and Dave would come with her. Dave would drive her, and they would do the monthly public ghost hunts.
Wow.
And that was where I first met Polly, and that's where I first met Dave. And if it hadn't have been for her capture of the Shadow Man photograph, we may have never met. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. If the Shadow Man photograph was never taken, then Paranormal Quest may have never existed.
Well, I mean, if that picture wasn't taken, there's a lot of stuff at the pen that wouldn't be going on. I mean, how many TV shows and things like that have been there specifically because of that piece of evidence?
It put it on the map, to be fair. It is crazy the way that place blew up after that picture started making its way onto the early internet days.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dave, was it really you down the hallway?
I wish I was that skinny and tall, but it was not me.
All right, so looking at your origins to now, you've been around the block. You've seen a lot of really cool things. What are some cases that you would say caught you off guard? Because you guys, nerves of steel, you've done just about the Conjuring house, Bel Air house, every prison there is. I mean, you guys are tough. What cases really took you back?
It's kind of interesting because, as Steve would always say, Steve had a little saying that we cut our teeth at the West Virginia Penitentiary. It was like we were infants when back then. I mean, and we probably almost were infants cutting our teeth back then. I think I was only 14 when I started, hanging out there.
Oh, wow.
And so we were young, and we learned about paranormal investigation from one of the most haunted and violent prisons in the United States. So we gravitate towards that a lot, and we love investigations like Pennhurst, like actually one of the ones that I'm working on right now that's going to be coming out this Saturday is Crescent. We love huge old haunted buildings that just from looking at it make you start to shake a little bit. And especially Jason, he starts to get a little bit faint when he gets near a prison. I think he not from fright, not from fear, but from excitement. He just gets so excited he starts to pass out. So
very true.
So it's just we have a passion for it. We always say that it's in our blood to do those types of huge and very historic, but also very tragic and dark locations. And we did Pennhurst 2 years ago. One of our favorites, Randolph County Infirmary, was an amazing location that we've done. And just the evidence that we've gotten from these places, it's just so hard to figure out where to begin, what to start talking about, just because we've done so many and have so much evidence.
Is there any that scared you, Ryan?
Oh, that scared me. I'd have to think back on that. I would say the only time I've ever actually almost soiled my pants, I would say that would have to be when we investigated a little house in Mitchell, Indiana called Whispers Estate.
Okay.
It wasn't even a big prison. I remember because you'd have to understand, if you've never heard of Whispers Estate, this little house is set up for paranormal research. It is a historic house. There is history. People did die there, but the people that own the house and the people that manage the house have specific seance rooms. They have Ouija boards in every room. They have different bells. All the windows are covered with this blackout vinyl.
Oh, wow.
So that no sunlight gets in day or night. You don't know what time of day it is when you're in that house. And there's even up on the attic floor what they call an oculus room, mirrors covering every wall of this room, and you lock yourself in there with just a never-ending, endless vortex of your own image. And they say that can help open a portal. And it's just, that is what that house is there for. It is there to stir paranormal activity up. And I remember we had some creepy voices come through our spirit box on the 3rd floor, and then we moved down to the 2nd floor, and we have an action camera that we love to use because it's such a wide angle shot. It's hard to miss when stuff happens with that wide angle, but it doesn't have a good battery life on it. So we have to have an external battery that plugs into the camera. And we set it on the tripod. There's a nice flat surface there where the tripod legs actually fold out that you can set this battery pack down on. And we've used it like that every single time we've used this action camera for years. And I'm sitting there, Dave's over in Rachel's room, one of the spirits they believe haunts one of the spirits they believe haunts Whispers Estate. And I'm sitting over in the old servants' quarters back by the stairs that lead up to the servants' quarters on a pew that they frequently say shakes all the time. And as I'm sitting there, I just get into this trance to where I'm listening for the smallest and slightest sound. And I just happen to think out, I say, you can use our energy to make stuff happen. And as I'm listening for I could have probably heard a mouse fart. That's how tuned in I was to that space auditorily. And all of a sudden, I didn't realize what it was at the time, but that battery pack somehow left that tripod when none of us were moving. We were all sitting down. Both Dave and I were sitting down. It left the tripod, and when it hit the floor, it rang out a sound that sounded to me like the same volume as a jet engine taking off, and I about fell out of the seat. I mean, if you watch that episode back, it's one of the things that makes us all laugh the most, I think, out of any piece of evidence we've caught, because you can tell, for the first time ever on camera, I am genuinely about ready to just die. My heart is about ready to just stop. And I cuss and I scream, and then the adrenaline goes for hours. That is probably the only time I can say that I genuinely felt real terror on an investigation.
Wow.
That was a good one.
What about you, Dave?
Well, I'm quite the opposite of Ryan. I am very jumpy, and I get scared very easily. I even got scared by my own reflection in a mirror, and that's not a joke, on an investigation. And it's the strangest thing, because it's not necessarily because I'm afraid of the spirits or whatnot that's in the place. I'm more actually afraid of the dark, which is kind of a funny thing. But I would say probably recently that I can think of is when we were at Greenville Manor, and we were up in the attic, and I believe we were using the ghost tube, which our friends Amy and Jared of Amy's Crypt, they made that awesome app, and we were using that up there, and just the strangest things kept coming through, and I was terrified, and I was like backed into this corner, and this voice just came out of that thing, and it chilled me to the bone. And it was that place, if you've never been there, absolutely should be the #1 place on your bucket list, because it's insanely haunted.
Now, where's that at?
It's in Greenville, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, they just opened up for investigations, I believe, the beginning of this year. So.
Yeah, oops, sorry about my door there. Hold on a second.
That adds to the effect. This is audio only, so people are just gonna. Oh, did you hear that?
Did you hear that door close? It's interesting because, like Dave said, it opened up just earlier this year, and I think we were one of the first groups, at least the first YouTube channels, YouTube Paranormal Investigators, that got to go into Greenville Manor, and we had never heard of the place. It's a historic home in Greenville, Pennsylvania, that was turned into a funeral home and was used as a funeral home after that. But there was a tragic death of one of the family members, the patriarch of the household, Mr. Gibson, accidentally shot himself in the leg with a service pistol and bled out and died in the bedroom upstairs. Wow. But then they turned it into a funeral home. And when I say that we have never had an investigation where we had nonstop paranormal activity, that's the way I'd describe Greenville Manor. It was like we couldn't keep up. That's how crazy it was. All night long, too. We had the Mel meter pushed over downstairs in the casket viewing room on the 3rd floor, like Dave said, just weird voices coming through. Our motion sensors, which rarely ever go off, would not stop going off. Wow. The paranormal music box just kept going and going and going, and it was just wild. And by the end of the night, we were exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
Like, all right, enough. I need a nap.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing was we do something called an abandonment session, where we leave cameras set up in the location and leave to go get dinner, so that we can allow the house to have time alone, so we can hear or see if anything happens when it's completely empty. And we ended up losing 1/4 of our abandonment session that night because we put a camera in the basement, and I cannot explain this camera malfunction. It was just like when we looked at the file, it was corrupted, but after I recovered the file, there's this very loud beeping, just like it sounds like like a fire alarm and a new modern fire alarm in a building going off over the entire clip. And then after about 11 minutes, it just completely cuts the clip off. No explanation for it. Like, we used the same SD card the rest of the night, and it never did it again. I never formatted it, or else I wouldn't have been able to recover the file, and everything else was normal. It was just so weird.
Battery was perfectly fine.
Yeah, battery. It was plugged into the wall. Yeah, it wasn't even running off a battery.
So literally just gone.
Just gone, and the weirdest sound over top of it, like weirdest audio interference over the file. So just weird stuff like that all night long. So.
Now, is that a place that you're going back to?
Oh, I'd love to go back there one day.
Yeah, we hosted an event there, and we had about 30 people who watched the channel come out and investigate with us rather. And we were just trying to help them raise some money for the house because they're going through a tough time there. But every single person who came to that event left having had an experience.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, oops, sorry, go ahead.
That's all I had to say.
Oh, okay. Got to do with the hand raising technique here. I'm getting. And probably one of the coolest parts about that particular event was the owners of Greenville Manor, Marcus and Katie, introduced us to a girl named Button and her husband Kevin. But Button actually grew up in the house with her grandfather owned the house before, shortly after it was closed down as a funeral home. And she kind of spent some childhood years having paranormal experiences in the house. So it's always fun to hold those events because you get to meet people like that. And that's another amazing quality of YouTube, because just recently we had someone reach out via the comments from another investigation we did at the Wandle house, which features a very prominent ghost story of one of the cooks that used to cook in the restaurant there, saying that was his grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And that he'd love to get in contact with the Wandle House Museum to try and see if he can go in there and communicate with his grandmother. So, and that's one of the amazing aspects of putting your investigations on YouTube and doing what we do, is we not only get to experience the history when we're there, but it's like an outlet for people to reach out to us and for us to reach out to people.
It's not just local. You know, we talked about how you guys go everywhere. Do these places seek you out? Do you seek them out? Is it a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? How does that work?
Mostly it's Dave running around searching the internet trying to find places for us to go.
Yeah, it's been well over a decade of scouring the internet and word of mouth and all of that fun stuff, just trying to find locations. And then, like we said, we started doing this every single week, and it's just become increasingly more difficult to find locations. And we found ourselves having to go further and further away from home because we've pretty much pestered everybody to death in this area here to come investigate. And it's getting more difficult.
Well, I mean, there's very few people in the world right now that can say they are professional ghost hunters, as in that is their job. And really, you two, that's it, right? You guys hunt ghosts for a living. Not that you get paid for the things, but through YouTube, that's how you make it, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. That goes back to when I was just getting into the paranormal, I remember. And the one thing that I'm so grateful about is how supportive my family was. And being that they didn't really investigate the paranormal themselves, you know, like Dave had Polly to investigate with because that was like the family hobby. My family was into the paranormal, but they didn't actually go out and do it themselves. And I remember specifically one of the best pieces of advice that my mom ever gave me was she said that, you know, you can't be a ghost hunter for a living. And she said, you have to find something else to do because this is a hobby. You can't do this for a living. And I kind of took that literally and made ghost hunting a side part or a part of what I do for a living. But, you know, it really made me start to brainstorm and start to go down the alleyway of video production and filmmaking, and really made me focus and concentrate on not only video broadcasting, but documentary filmmaking. And when you do that as a for a living, create YouTube videos, create documentaries, create films, you can create films about anything. And it just so happened that we decided to create our films and our documentaries about ghost hunting.
Perfect. It's perfect.
It's a workaround of the system.
Yeah, you beat it. You beat the system. You're like, I don't charge, and I get to do it. It's awesome. It's the best.
Yep.
It is literally the best. Did you have any like formal training like on the video side of it, or do you just learn as you go?
It's been a lot of learn as I go, but I did actually graduate with a bachelor's of art degree, which I'm looking up at it right now, from Point Park University. I went to college for 4 years for cinema production.
Oh, nice.
And so I graduated with a degree in cinema production, which I'd done a couple of freelance jobs and stuff, but I've mostly just worked for myself. So it's like, could I have just taught myself and not spent all that money? But, you know, I absolutely would not change a thing. I don't regret ever going to college or to study at Point Park University. I met some of my most interesting friends there and at Point Park. So yeah, I do have some formal training in the art of cinema production, but for what we do, it's mostly learn as we go. That's
very cool. What about you, Dave? Do you get into the video side of it, or are you just the talent?
Well,
he's talented, I'll tell you that.
There were several different times that I considered actually going for pretty much the same thing that Ryan did, but I have this overwhelming, crippling fear of being in debt, and I opted not to go. And it turns out, you know, for most professions, you don't really need a degree anymore to do anything, but I still wish I would have went so I could learn some of the technical things that Ryan will sit there and talk about, and it just goes straight over my head. But as far as like for the show, I tend to stay more of like helping with lighting, and then certain visual shots, I'll like make a notation about that maybe we should get that. And I do the drone flying and all of that fun stuff.
That's
and
cool.
as far as video editing goes, I'm a little too spacey to sit down and actually focus on that. But we're actually getting ready to start doing some vlogs and stuff for our second channel that I'm going to force myself to focus on and edit those.
A second channel. Oh, gluttons for punishment.
Yeah, we don't have enough going on as is, so.
That's right. Well, that second channel kind of happened as an accident. Do you want to hear about that, Jordan?
Oh, absolutely. I love accidents.
So the second channel happened because YouTube decided to try and tank our first channel because we were doing live streams and uploading content. And it's very weird how the algorithm works. There are some YouTube channels that can get away with uploading and doing live streams on the same channel, but it's kind of a rule of thumb that we've looked through many forums and research to find out. We couldn't figure out why our channel was just going down the tubes. And this was around, I would say, summer of last year, June, July of last year. It was just absolutely, we hit a high point right around June-ish, and then it just the rest of the year started to tank. And we're like, what is happening? Why is no one new finding our channel? Our subscribers are not going up, our video views are going down. And we would send out emails. Dave would relentlessly pester YouTube asking them what the issue was, and we ended up having to do our own research and find out that there are a lot of channels that can't live stream on their YouTube channel that they upload their edited content to. And so we decided to create a specific channel for any time we wanted to live stream. And it worked out because those that want to watch us live stream go over and subscribe to that one. And those that don't only stay subscribed to the main channel. But if you are a content creator that is listening to this podcast out there, that is something you may want to consider. If you're not seeing growth like you'd like to, you're uploading weekly and just something doesn't feel right about the way your channel's performing, maybe it's time to quit your live streaming and move that to a different channel.
Wow, that's really good advice. I mean, a lot of folks wouldn't even know that. So what's the name of the second channel?
Paranormal Quest Live. It's easy to remember.
Now with and this is a question I have because there's 4 of you in the group, right? With you guys doing it every week, and you two kind of, I don't want to say the main ones, but you two are blessed enough to do it full time. Is every investigation with all 4 of you, or are there times where you guys have to go off on your own?
There is a lot of the time, especially recently, where Dave and I have gone off on our own. And that is because when we decided to start uploading every single week, we put the brunt of the workload on ourselves, I guess you would say. It's between finding the locations and then the video work and the editing. Dave does the reviewing of the video content. And when Jason comes along on the investigations, he'll review the audio that he records and stuff. But Jason is a paranormal investigator first and foremost. He really never had much of an interest in filmmaking or that side of it. And in fact, it was a very strong transition that he had to make when he joined our group, which was sometimes having to make a video out of your investigations can ruin the fun of the investigation. You don't just get to run around like a little kid and look around at all these buildings. You have a schedule to stick to, and you have a shooting schedule to abide by. And sometimes having a schedule is not quite as fun as just going. So
he wants the experience. He wants the experience.
Right. And he was very good about transitioning, but sometimes he really did, I guess, resent that aspect of making the videos like we did. And he has become very enveloped in his job at the West Virginia Penitentiary as a tour guide. And so Steve has his Archive of the Afterlife Paranormal Museum that he is, that is his priority, is the museum. So when we started uploading weekly, we always knew that Jason and Steve would always be a part of Paranormal Quest. It would be a 4-person group of paranormal investigators, 4 best friends, but that there'd be sometimes that it would just be Dave and I because of the workload that is required in uploading weekly. So
I know because I did a brief stint in college doing broadcasting, and I've always been obsessed with video editing and things like that. I know the work that you're putting into it, so the fact that you're able to keep that up with an episode a week, I don't have a hat on, but hats off to you. That is work. That is a lot of hard work. If you've never worked with video out there, it's very time consuming, especially when you get into the editing. And I'm sure, on the paranormal investigation side, for those of you out there that investigate, you know, let's say you have 4 recorders out there and you're there for 8 hours. That's a lot of audio to listen to. Now, if you got cameras you're rolling, that's a lot of video footage to roll through. I mean, man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
The
It
fact
is
that you
it
keep
is a full-time job.
It's a big undertaking, you know, and a side of it that most people probably don't think about or don't see is the actual filming day. You know, right now between Ryan and I, we are doing in like 8 to 12 hours what these TV shows are turning around in like a week and a week and a half that they have at a location just to shoot. And, you know, we're going out and we're doing that in one day. And then Ryan turns around and edits it out into an episode. And we do that in 1 week. We have a 1 week turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
And that was going to be my next question. Like, do you have like a backlog? Like, I'm working on the one that we did a couple weeks ago. No, you're turn and burn.
Yeah, because we kind of made that mistake, and when we started uploading weekly, we didn't create a backlog first. The last time we had a backlog was when we began season 8, because we took 2 weeks off from uploading to go on a road trip through Iowa and Kansas to film at, I think, how many was it, Dave? 5 or 6 locations that we filmed at in a one. Well, it was like a 10-day period, or an 8-day period. We did 5 investigations and filmed 5 episodes.
5 episodes in 8 days.
Yeah. Ooh. And that's with traveling too. You know, it was like a 12-hour trip to get out there, and then we're traveling pretty much every day to get to a new location, a new hotel, a new Airbnb. And then on top of that, we're filming and investigating. And then every single night that we get done, there is about 300 gigabytes worth of footage that I have to dump off of the cards to put on a hard drive so that we can reuse the cards again the next day. And then it's like get 2 or 3 hours of sleep and then get up and start driving again. And, it's always tough for people to see that effort when they can just only see the video when it comes out. But it is a lot of time and effort to film and edit that sort of stuff. So, and the only people that really understand are the content creators that do it. So,
did you keep that hard drive like wrapped in bubble wrap and like pillows and like, the nerves you must have had traveling with that?
Yeah, it does. I remember that was one of the things that I always had to do it before I went to bed, because Dave would say to me, "Why don't you just dump it when we're driving to the next location tomorrow?" And I would say, "No, because if that car hits a bump and that hard drive takes off, we're losing everything that we filmed." So I would lose sleep just so that we didn't lose the And yeah, it is. It can be nerve-wracking, but we go through so many hard drives. I mean, right over here, I'm looking to my right, and there's like a plastic bin to the right of me, and it has like 16 to 20 hard drives just in this plastic bin, and that's only what we've done since 2021.
Wow. So you do a hard drive, you'd just like keep the entire investigation on like a hard drive? Is that?
We usually get 4 terabyte hard drives, so you can fit about 8 investigations on it. So it's like every 2 months you have to buy a new hard drive.
Here's another question, and this is more of like, I guess, on the technical end of it. You know, you have, all this going on, right, during an investigation. Do you try to like timestamp some like certain events that you want to make sure hit, the video, so that it makes editing a little bit easier? You're like, oh yeah, the time where, we were in the study and the light flickered, it was about midnight. Let's make sure that's in there.
It is easy to make a mental note because, I don't know, also Dave is very, very good at watching the footage and providing timestamps for a lot of the video footage, especially abandonment, because that's the most tedious. Say out of any part of the episode to edit, abandonment's the most tedious, and it's the most tedious to review because you get 4 to 5 cameras. I mean, the amount of times Dave's probably gone blind staring at the screen that isn't moving.
Yes.
I'm glad you agree.
And, that was part of it. And that's why I do get tired and worn out from editing at times, but I would absolutely not choose to review the abandonment over that. My brain cannot watch a stationary image and listen to one thing with nothing happening for 10 to 12 hours straight.
Hats off, Dave.
We make a good team, because I couldn't do what he does, and He just said he couldn't do what I do, so yeah, we make a good team making
Hey, it
this.
works. It works.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to get back into the investigation part of it, the Conjuring House. I'm dying to hear some stories for the Conjuring House.
It was kind of cool, and I think the coolest part about the Conjuring House investigation that we did was just the fact that before we went to the Conjuring House, Jason reached out to an old friend of his for us to get an interview. And from years and years ago, when he had a radio show that he did, he got to interview Andrea Perron, who lived the story of the Conjuring House. It was her family that experienced that haunting. So before we went to the Conjuring House, 2 days before, we got on a video call with Andrea Perron, and we got to interview her. We got to interview her about her experiences and what actually happened to her family there. And it gave us a really good idea of what we could expect going in there, because the movie, as Dave will tell you, it's not like the movie.
It is not anything like the movie. I'm a huge fan of the Conjuring series, and when we rolled up to the place, I was like, "Really? This is it?" I mean, it is a very, very, very intriguing old farmhouse, and it's very cool to walk through and just see. It pretty much looks exactly like it was when it was first built, I believe. Just all the old hardware and all of the door hinges and all of that stuff. I like that more than the ghost hunting sometimes.
I would say it's a very, very old home, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very old.
Yeah, built in the 1700s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely very, if you've never seen pictures of it, it's a shock when you pull up to it, because, and I think the reasoning behind the style of house that they used in the Conjuring movie, because when they were originally presented, when they wanted to make that movie, they were presented with shooting in the actual house. And when they hired James Wan as the director of The Conjuring, he decided that he was not going to want to film in the actual house, not just because of the actual paranormal activity that could occur, but also because of his style of shooting. And you watch that movie, there's a lot of very long takes, a lot of moving shots, a lot of spacious, a lot of very complex camera movements that require space that you can move through. And when you walk into the actual house that inspired The Conjuring, there's not much space at all. It's very small. So it would be impossible to shoot that movie the same way that they did in that house. But it was so cool to get to hear the stories from Andrea Perron. And then while we were there, Andrea called us on the phone while we were standing in the Conjuring house and actually told us she tried to speak to the spirits over the phone, over speakerphone.
Oh, wow.
To try and incite activity. And it was like when we got on the phone with her, just noises and sounds started to come from the upstairs from her old bedroom, which was very bizarre. From where she stayed, where she slept, is where the noises were coming from, and from the boarding room upstairs. And it was very difficult to hear in the moment because we were on the phone with her. But yeah, there was some creepy stuff that went down. And we caught a really cool voice in the basement. Steve and I were running a pedal box session, and we asked if they remembered Andrea, and it said, "Andrea, how's Andrea?" is what it said through the actual pedal box, or portal they're sometimes called. Essentially just a box to filter out the white noise sweep of the spirit box is what it was. So, but yeah.
Right. So I want to ask you about your equipment, because you've said some neat names here in the last little bit. What are your go-tos? What do you use? What is something that you have that other people might not have?
You want to start on that one, Dave?
My favorite thing to use on an investigation is the REM pod, because it's simple to use, it's easy to set up, and there is a lot of interaction that you get with that device. And that, along with just a trusty camcorder, those are my go-tos.
What is a REM pod? What does that look like?
Go ahead, Ryan. You're better at describing it than I am.
Yep. So the REM pod is a proximity meter, and what it does is it uses a circuit to create its own, like a closed circuit to create its own magnetic field. And the antenna that sticks up out of the top of it has almost like a force field. If you ever seen like Star Wars, when they put up those force fields around the ships whenever they're going into battle, that's kind of what it's not visible, but that's what it reminds me of. And when you break through that static force field with something that has a static charge, for example, like our body holds a constant static charge. When you break through that static field, it'll start to alarm. There's lights on it. It's a cylinder, and it'll light up the lights on it, and it'll make noise. And it's interesting because there's times when we have had that set up and we've asked questions. We've asked it on command, can you touch it? And it'll go off, and then we'll say, can you step away from it? And then it'll go off, or then it'll stop going. It'll stop alarming. Probably the most recent memory that I have of that was we have a meter, which also has the REM function to it because it's made by the same manufacturer. And the meter is just an EMF detector. It can detect electricity in the air, basically, is what it does. But the meter itself also detects ambient temperature, and it has that REM function with the antenna on top of the device. And so we have that set up, or I had that set up when I was in a room that was called the Demon Room in the Grand Midway Hotel, right in front of one of the portraits that is considered a portrait of some demonic entity that an artist had painted. And I heard it go off, and I didn't have the camera on it. And I turned the camera around and set it on the floor so that it can very clearly get the meter with the REM function going off. And I said, can you get as close as you can to it? And it starts going off on that first green light, and then it goes all the way to the highest light, the red light, which means it's the closest that it can get. So it's like on command it does that. And when those types of interactions happen, it's really cool and a little bit too weird to be coincidence.
Yeah.
And I would say we love our go-to pieces of equipment, the camera, the digital voice recorder, the spirit box, the REM pod, the meter. We also love to experiment with different stuff, too. We've done quite a bit of experimentation over the years with different pieces of equipment, like the SLS camera. I'd consider that an experimental piece of equipment that a lot of groups have experimented with.
Now, what is that? I'm not familiar.
So the SLS camera is essentially what it's an acronym. It means structure light sensor camera, and you can make one with an Xbox Kinect. If you remember the Xbox Kinects, they will project these infrared laser lights, and they will reflect off of the objects that they hit back into the sensor that the camera creates. And what it's looking for, because the Xbox Kinect is meant to map human shapes, so you can play the games on it like you used to. Or like you can still on an Xbox One. Apparently it's still a thing. I don't know. I'm out of the video game loop. And Microsoft, you can download this Microsoft program onto the tablet and plug the Kinect into the tablet. And if you have the right connectors and the right programs downloaded, you can actually see the image, and stick figures will pop up when there's no person standing in front of you, like it is mapping someone that is standing there. And it was very experimental because it is an imperfect piece of equipment, I would say. It will map chairs. It will map door frames at times. It will map things that are not human, that are slightly shaped like humans, like tombstones when you're in a cemetery. So, but just not a good thing to have happen.
I was about to say. Make your heart race a little bit fast on that one.
It will. And so if using it over the years, we had to get used to figuring out how the equipment worked and when it was giving us a false positive. I would say the coolest thing we've ever caught with the SLS camera was at the Sally House, which, if you've ever heard of the Sally House, it is thought to be America's most haunted house. It became famous in the 90s when it was featured on a TV show in a documentary because it was supposed to be the most evil and demon-possessed house in America.
Wow.
And then it was made famous again by YouTubers going there and staying the night. People like Sam and Colby and a bunch of other YouTubers kind of brought the Sally House back into the limelight. And Ghost Adventures has done an episode there. And so the Sally House, since the 90s, has been a pretty strong name in paranormal investigation. Well, we were in the living room, which, if you watch that documentary, I can't remember what the name of it is. Do you remember what it is, Dave? It was a documentary TV show that aired in the 90s.
I do not remember.
You got that on hand, Dave?
Yeah, did you got that written down there somewhere? But I will say that in that documentary, the owner of the house, the man that is attacked most frequently, on the documentary, he has scratches materialize on his body right in front of the camera, like you can see the scratches forming as the camera's pointed at him. And it was in that same room. In that living room, we had the SLS camera set up as we were getting ready to go down to the basement. And out of nowhere, the REM pod, like Dave was talking about, the REM pod just starts going off. And so we move from the kitchen into the living room, and now Dave is pointing the SLS camera at the REM pod. and the REM pod stops alarming, but then all of a sudden over by the couch, a figure pops up and it looks like it's on its hands and knees on the floor, like crawling. And it's like crawling across the floor. And I started to count down. I was like, Dave asked, can you touch the REM pod? And so I start to count down. It's like 3, 2, 1. And all of a sudden that figure goes straight to the REM pod, hits where the REM pod is, disappears, and then the REM pod lights up.
Oh.
So
Yeah, that was freaky.
Yeah.
And you can imagine the amount of excitement that ensued after that when we're like yelling and like happy dancing and you know. Meanwhile, we don't even realize that we may have just caught a demon if the stories are true, you know.
Yeah, you have no clue what it is. You're like, woohoo!
So, but you know, it's stuff like that keeps us coming back for more. And yeah, that particular capture with the SLS camera in the Sally house will always be in my top 10 favorite experiences with the SLS camera. Probably top 3 favorite SLS experiences.
Man, that's exciting. So next up is the trip to Australia. That's the end of the year, right?
Yep.
Now,
yep,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, yep, we're real excited for that one.
How are you going to map out, like, because I know you do, you know, an episode a week. Are you going to take a little hiatus while you're traveling and doing one big, like, series on Australia, or are you still going to keep cranking them out?
If we do have to take a little bit of time off for the travel time, what we may just do is film the journey over to Australia and upload a travel vlog in its place before, like, in between episodes. But we're really excited to be able to film as much content as we can and release as much as we can to really showcase just the amazing, not just landscape, but the history and the hauntings of Australia. Because when people think about haunted places, I mean, America is most of the time what people think of, but also the UK and Europe and stuff. But Australia is one that kind of gets overlooked, and we're excited to get over to Australia to showcase that and show people all of the amazing haunted locations in Australia.
That's going to be really exciting. You know, we're out of time here, but let us know where we can find you, how to subscribe to you, everywhere online that you are, so people can get up with you.
Yeah, if you want to find us, you can just on YouTube search Paranormal Quest, or you can go youtube.com/Paranormal Quest. And you can also find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're even on TikTok every now and again. And it's all the same username. If you just look for Paranormal Quest, you can find us pretty easily. And yeah, we have a second channel. If you look up Paranormal Quest Live, that's where we live stream at. And keep up with all the adventures. Like I always say at the end of every single episode that we film, we are on a journey, on a quest to find some of the most haunted places in the world. And we would love to bring everyone along for the ride if they want to watch. So we hope you join us.
So cool. Thank you guys so much. Paranormal Quest. Go check them out. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hey, have a great night.
You too.
You too.
And with that, the fire is out. I want to thank you so much to Paranormal Quest. Great group of guys. And I want to thank you for listening each week. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't connected with me on social media yet, Fireside Paranormal Hub on Facebook. We're on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the socials. Don't forget to check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Fireside Paranormal. There is merch, name drops, a private Discord server, giveaways, and don't forget those bonus audio. We have the after interview conversations with each of our guests. You don't want to miss those. Lots of cool stories that come afterwards. Check out our website, firesideparanormal.com. Get you some of that sweet, sweet Fireside merch. And that is all the time we have for this week. So until next week, everybody, don't be afraid, only believe.